Everyone thought Asano was just an ordinary orphan, but his life changed when his crush, who was also a top-secret spy, decided to marry him and move in together. Asano was a young man living a positive life, but everything changed one day. His entire family perished in a horrific car accident. Asano was the only survivor, bearing countless physical and emotional scars. He was so traumatized that he avoided making friends out of fear of seeing them get hurt. The only person still close to Asano was his childhood friend, Mutsumi Yozakura, who was the only one he still talked to. Many years had passed since then, and both of them had entered high school. Despite being in school for a month, Asano still wouldn't speak to anyone. A small group of 3 people constantly invited Asano to hang out, but he turned them down every day. Meanwhile, Mutsumi was always incredibly friendly with everyone. She was like the school's friendly queen, spreading kindness wherever she went. She would sit down with Asano to have lunch and suggested that he should occasionally hang out with others. Asano remained aloof and even questioned why the friendly queen didn't go out with a senior who had confessed his feelings. Mutsumi replied that she wasn't interested and then took out her lunchbox. Just then Kyoichiro, the school vice principal, seized the opportunity to grab a piece of tamagoyaki, Japanese omelet. Asano was startled by the vice principal's sudden appearance, while Mutsumi was annoyed and told him to leave. Kyoichiro said he couldn't resist the delicious food she made. He then decided to leave and told Asano to meet him in his office after school. At the end of the day, Asano went to the office, confused about what Kyoichiro wanted. When he entered the room, Kyoichiro greeted him. He had prepared tea and invited Asano to sit comfortably. Asano was wary because Kyoichiro was getting too close, but was surprised when Kyoichiro started asking about Mutsumi and why Asano was so close to her. Asano found the question a bit odd, and Kyoichiro decided to show him pictures of Mutsumi from when she was 3 years old. Asano felt something was off since they had only known Kyoichiro for a month. Kyoichiro continued to explain that keeping teenage boys away from her was difficult, and he had to give a senior who had confessed his feelings a good beating to make him stop looking at Mutsumi. Asano started to sense something was wrong, when suddenly Kyoichiro pulled out a knife and pressed it to Asano's neck, telling him to say his last words. Just when it seemed like the end, a girl with white hair entered through the window. She stopped Kyoichiro and used a flash bomb to escape with Asano. Asano woke up later in the afternoon, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. His social anxiety flared up, and he panicked, not knowing where he was. Mutsumi reassured him not to worry, explaining that these people were his new family and that he was in the Yozakura house. She introduced him to everyone: Futaba, the girl with white hair who saved him; Shinzo, the guy with blue hair; Shion, the girl with pink hair; Kengo, the guy with blonde hair; and Nanao, the guy with the team's mascot costume. She said they were a family of spies, and she was relieved to finally reveal the truth to Asano after keeping it hidden for 10 years. Asano was worried, but she reassured him that spies were quite common these days. Asano even thought that online services for spies were a thing now. Asano still thought it was all a joke and snatched the gun from Shinzo. He thought it was a toy, but the gun fired a real shot into the ceiling, causing Asano's spirit to almost fly away with it. Futaba explained that they were freelancers, ranked 48 stars in quality of service due to their excellent work. Kengo mentioned that Kyoichiro was the eldest, the center of the universe, the most reported spy, and the face of the family. Futaba said he was the best spy in the family and apologized on behalf of Kyoichiro for endangering Asano's life. She told Asano that when Mutsumi was younger, she was involved in a major accident that left her severely injured, and Asano had taken all the blame upon himself. Since then, he had been obsessed with protecting his sister no matter what. Over the years, his tolerance for Asano was due to their childhood friendship. Recently, they had received information on Facebook about someone planning to assassinate Mutsumi. Was this a pretext for him to remove the eyesore that was Asano? Suddenly, the alarm sounded throughout the house, and everyone jumped up. Futaba explained to the confused Asano that the eldest brother had come to execute him. Asano was anxious, but she told him not to worry because, honestly, even when playing 5 against 1, their average win rate against the eldest was only 30%. She turned to Asano and said that the only way to survive was to marry Mutsumi immediately. She explained that their family had an unbreakable rule: no one could kill any family member, and even the eldest wouldn't dare break this rule. Asano just needed to put the ring on Mutsumi's finger and their marriage would be recognized, allowing them to live as a family. This touched on Asano's traumatic childhood incident, causing him to gasp. Mutsumi told Futaba that this was very harsh on Asano because he had a fear of getting close to people. Futaba apologized for being too blunt. The group prepared to fight Kyoichiro, only to realize he had been sitting comfortably in the room for a while. He turned to Shinzo and said he had disabled all the traps and instructed them to hand Asano over quickly. Futaba suddenly stepped forward, grabbed his tie, spun him around, and slammed him to the ground. Shinzo quickly used his robotic arm to pin him down, while Nanao flexed his muscles and delivered a solid punch to Kyoichiro's face. Kengo and Shion took the opportunity to escort Asano away, hoping Kyoichiro wouldn't notice. Kyoichiro decided to use his special move to knock both of them away, then stood up and said they had left too many openings in their attacks. Asano was stunned after witnessing the strength of the spy family. Futaba shouted that she would buy them some time. She ran to Asano while Kyoichiro used his spiderweb technique to block all her attacks and tied her to the roof. Shion told Kengo to hide Asano somewhere, while she took out her phone to activate some drones from the ceiling to shoot at Kyoichiro. Kengo took them to another room, and along with Mutsumi, they hid Asano behind a concealed frame. A while later, Kyoichiro entered the room after dealing with the drones without a scratch on him. He saw Mutsumi and Asano together in the room. He demanded that she hand over the boy, but she ran towards him with a gun and their family dog. Kyoichiro was aware of the whole ruse and quickly tied her up with rope, then removed the disguise that Kengo was using. Realizing it was futile, Mutsumi revealed that she was disguised as Asano and told Kyoichiro that Asano was completely harmless. Kyoichiro replied that the only way he wouldn't touch Asano was if she agreed never to leave the house again. She became nervous as Kyoichiro approached her. He said she would never have friends or a romantic relationship. She couldn't go out, and he would also cut off the internet connection. As long as he could ensure her safety, that was all that mattered. He embraced her and Mutsumi began to cry, knowing she had no other choice. But Asano, who had been watching through a gap, decided to reveal himself. Asano told Mutsumi that she didn't need to do this. Kyoichiro told Asano to leave since he was no longer of any use to him. Suddenly, Asano shouted for Mutsumi to give him the ring because he was ready to become part of her family. Mutsumi, moved to tears, took out a ring and threw it to Asano. Asano immediately lunged to catch it. To his horror, Kyoichiro was faster and used a rope to trap Asano along with the ring. Just as Kyoichiro thought it was over, Asano stubbornly held onto the rope, despite it cutting his hand badly, to get the ring and put it on his finger. Asano completed the marriage and officially became a member of the family. The others watched as Mutsumi hugged him tightly. Futaba told Kyoichiro that it was now too late for him to harm Asano, and that he would have to endure youth training so Asano could protect Mutsumi. That evening, Asano got up to go home. Although Futaba wanted to take him back, Asano declined. He decided to return home with Mutsumi, as she needed emotional support right now. Asano lay down on his bed, looking at the ring and reflecting on the crazy day before falling into a deep sleep. The next morning, Asano was awakened by the sound of an alarm. As he opened his eyes, he saw Kyoichiro standing over him with a knife. He was about to stab Asano, but Asano rolled away just in time to escape death. Kyoichiro was impressed and said he was just testing him for fun. Asano asked what Kyoichiro was doing in his house, and Kyoichiro replied that the previous stunt was a Yozakura family tradition. Asano thought the elder was clearly trying to kill him, but Kyoichiro insisted that he was just trying to mold him into the #1 spy. Kyoichiro said that if Asano wanted to stay safe, he needed to sleep with one eye open. He then instructed Asano to prepare for the Yozakura family's traditional morning exercise and tied him up, dangling in midair. Meanwhile, Mutsumi was preparing lunch when she heard Asano's screams. She ran to see what was happening, and was shocked to find Asano suspended like something out of an action movie, while Kyoichiro was tossing him around in various ways. She demanded that he lower her husband, but Kyoichiro calmly checked his watch and said it was time for them to leave the house. He quickly grabbed Mutsumi and their bags and jumped out of the window, setting off a bomb that exploded behind Asano's house. He set them down and explained that Asano's house had been rigged with a bomb the previous night. He promised to explain more and told Asano to remember one thing beyond the 5 principles he was taught. The main goal of their family was to protect Mutsumi at all costs. He then instructed them to get into the car while Mutsumi helped Asano to his feet. Inside the car, Kyoichiro spoke with Shinzo, who had discovered that the bomb was planted in the kitchen. This meant that Mutsumi was the target of the assassination attempt. Asano was very confused, but Kyoichiro explained that in the world of spies, information spread quickly, and the news of Mutsumi's marriage had reached everyone in their field. Asano remained bewildered and asked why they were targeting Mutsumi. Kyoichiro responded that it was quite simple. Mutsumi was the 10th head of the Yozakura family. He elaborated on their family history, explaining that for many years they had been involved in espionage because their bloodline possessed a unique power that granted supernatural abilities to the Yozakura descendants. According to him, in each generation, a Yozakura child born without any supernatural abilities was destined to become the head of the family. Although the head had no supernatural powers, they were the only ones who could produce children with extraordinary abilities. This meant that without this person, the Yozakura lineage and their supernatural bloodline would become extinct. That was why Mutsumi, as the head of the family, was the only one who could keep their lineage alive. Kyoichiro was frustrated because someone like Asano was marrying her. Since their family had existed for so long and was so famous, they had countless enemies wanting to annihilate the Yozakura clan, and the best way to do that was to eliminate Mutsumi. As he was explaining this, a car suddenly came up behind them. A young man in the car fired a bazooka at them, but the driver managed to swerve in time. Asano was petrified, but Kyoichiro remained unfazed, sipping his tea while the car was pelted with bullets. He told Asano to relax because the car was bulletproof and instructed the driver to speed up. The enemy continued to pursue them, pulling out a heavy machine gun to shoot at the limo, but Kyoichiro calmly enjoyed his tea. Mutsumi reassured Asano not to worry because their dog, Goliath, was the best driver in the house. Asano was terrified to learn that his life was entrusted to a dog. As the enemies continued to fire missiles, Goliath's sharp maneuvers caused Kyoichiro's tea to spill, making him furious. He leaped onto the roof of the car, using a rope to block all the incoming bullets while the young man with the bazooka fired another shot at him. However, the mini rocket was sliced apart by Kyoichiro's rope. After a series of impressive moves, Kyoichiro used the rope to shred the pursuing cars into pieces, causing them to explode before returning to the vehicle as if nothing had happened. He told Asano that now that he was married to Mutsumi, he had a responsibility to protect her at all costs. He handed Asano a gun and instructed him to eliminate anyone suspicious. He also showed Asano the Facebook account of the person who had planted the bomb in his house. According to Kyoichiro, this person was one of the most skilled bombers still alive and extremely dangerous. However, he had a major flaw. He was obsessed with social media and had inadvertently exposed his bombing activities online. Kyoichiro advised Asano to protect Mutsumi today because he was occupied with other matters and warned that he would eliminate Asano if she was even slightly harmed. During the exercise, Asano received a notification on his phone. The bomber had just posted that a second bomb had been planted. Asano looked around and saw a shadow briefly pass by in the hallway. He immediately ran to the infirmary, where a nurse asked what he needed. Asano decided to return to class for the moment. As he observed Mutsumi during the break, before she spoke with her friends, he received another notification that a third bomb had been planted. Despairing, Asano realized how difficult Mutsumi's life was. While he was lost in thought, 3 young men approached him and offered him some chocolate. Everyone was astonished when Asano accepted and ate it. They were surprised and asked why he was acting so friendly today, as he usually didn't talk to them. Asano, worried about his wife, momentarily forgot his social anxiety, but thanks to their reminder, he remembered his condition and fainted. Asano woke up in the infirmary, under Mitsumi's watchful care. She asked if he was okay. Asano felt she was too good for him and questioned if he was truly the right person for her. He admitted that despite being childhood friends, he knew nothing about her family or the daily life and death struggles she faced. Hearing this, Mutsumi got angry and delivered a karate chop to his head, declaring that Asano was the one stubbornly wanting to join her no matter what. She had always wanted to marry him. As Asano relaxed a little, he suddenly noticed a large bomb attached to his leg. The bomb exploded violently, destroying everything in the room. Fortunately, Asano managed to save Mutsumi by hiding under a nearby chair. He realized that the bomber was much smarter than they had anticipated. The bomber had deliberately posted misleading information on Facebook to distract Asano, making him focus solely on protecting Mutsumi. Asano removed his jacket, suspecting that a small bomb might be attached to it and could explode soon. Asano realized that the bomber knew he would always be near Mutsumi. Thus, the bomber had used this to turn Asano into a mobile bomb, knowing it would surely take Mutsumi's life. Understanding that time was running out, Asano decided to sacrifice himself to save Mutsumi and jumped out of the window, accepting his impending death. To his surprise, Kyoichiro appeared just in time to save him. At the last moment, Asano was caught by Kyoichiro's rope. Kyoichiro praised Asano for his understanding and said that since his work was done early, he had come to check on them. Asano noticed that a piece of rope had gotten into the bomb, halting the timer and preventing the explosion. Kyoichiro told Asano that now they were family, and family comes first. Despite still disliking Asano, he was willing to risk his life to ensure Asano's safety. He pulled Asano back inside and began to dismantle the bomb, explaining that their work wasn't finished yet. Soon after, the other siblings arrived, and Shinzo threw the handcuffed bomber into the room. Kyoichiro tied the bomber up with a rope and the bomb, then launched him into the sky. The bomb exploded in a spectacular display of fireworks, greeted by enthusiastic applause from the Yozakura family. The next morning, Asano woke up from a nightmare where he helplessly watched Mutsumi being captured. After waking, he felt a bit dizzy and accidentally stepped on the dog's tail. The dog affectionately bit him, prompting Asano to go downstairs for Mutsumi to bandage his hand. She apologized for Goliath and played with him. Asano remembered how terrifying the dream had been and was determined not to let it become a reality. He went to Futaba and Shinzo to request training so he could become stronger. Asano declared that he wanted to protect Mutsumi from all dangers, realizing that he almost failed to save her before. He might have died if Kyoichiro hadn't finished his task early. Futaba, surprised, asked if he was a newbie and explained that becoming stronger was not as simple as an anime. She showcased her strength and recounted how she had trained in various martial arts since she was 3 years old and completed her first assassination mission at 6. This meant that even for the Yozakura family members, mastering martial arts took 3 years. But for an ordinary person, it would take even longer than the final chapter of Hunter x Hunter. She told Asano that it was naive to think he could become stronger just through emotions, but she decided to give him a chance. She asked if Asano was ready to join the Yozakura family's comprehensive training program, which might be the fastest way for anyone to become stronger. Asano was extremely excited, but she told Asano to hold his enthusiasm and set a condition. Asano had to stay in the Yozakura house for 1 month. Only after that would his real training begin. Asano thought this was easy since he only needed to stay here. But as soon as Asano stood up, a trap was triggered, and he had to brace himself to avoid falling into a pit of sharp spikes below. Futaba arrived in front of Asano and told him that she forgot to mention that the Yozakura house was rigged with traps for spy training. Therefore, staying here was not as easy as Asano thought. She said if Asano survived the month, she would train him further. The next morning, Asano woke up to the blaring sound of a bird's alarm. Since Asano did not get up immediately, a bomb exploded in the room. Asano miraculously escaped the smoky room, but accidentally triggered another trap. A flamethrower appeared behind Asano, burning everything in its path as he ran down the hallway. Finally, Asano sat down at the breakfast table, and his kind wife Mutsumi tended to his injuries. Asano asked how she managed to avoid all these traps. She explained that the traps were controlled by a computer. When someone can avoid and disable all the traps, the computer will accept them as a member of the house and grant them the ability to activate or deactivate the traps. She added that it usually takes about 2 years to clear all the traps, which was quite a long time. Before Asano could complain, he was struck by a stomachache. Futaba nonchalantly explained that the food in the house was laced with a bit of poison to train their immune systems. This poison would not kill them but would definitely cause diarrhea. Asano immediately stood up and rushed to the bathroom, but it was locked tight. He could only get in if he unlocked the padlock and deciphered all the codes. From that day on, Asano's daily life was like hell. While others in the family could turn off the bird before it exploded, Asano was once again its victim. The refrigerator was covered in laser beams, so everyone had to be careful. But with her horns, it was no problem for Futaba as she used drones to get food. Futaba could also use her super speed to grab drinks. Asano repeatedly triggered traps and was bombarded by machine guns. To turn on the TV, Asano had to use a sniper rifle to hit the power button on the remote. But since no one bothered to install a recoil reducer, the rifle jolted Asano into the wall. At lunch, Asano still couldn't get used to the poison or crack the code for the bathroom, even with his wife's emotional support by his side. When Asano wanted to shower, the showerhead was set up to simulate the torture of being in a Russian interrogation room if there were a Third World War. The next day, Asano arrived at school like a living skeleton. He couldn't utter a word due to wearing a 30 kilograms heavy armor to increase his physical strength while trying to catch a break. After another tiring day, Asano tries to return to her room to sleep, but finds Mutsumi asleep while working. Asano covers her with a blanket and is motivated by her efforts. He goes outside and starts practicing his shooting skills. Eventually, Mutsumi wakes up and takes Asano inside. She tells Asano to have some tea and rest since he protected her before. She reminds him of the time a group of bullies, jealous of her fame, planned to drag her into the storage room to get a haircut. Asano shows up at the last minute, grabs the scissors from them, and cuts her own hair. The bullies run away, realizing that it is not a good idea to tease someone with a fierce temper, and Mutsumi is saved. Asano promises her that he will become stronger and always be by her side before going back to sleep. As the weeks pass, Asano finally learns how to deal with the bird and easily shuts it down. He moves down to the living room, skillfully avoiding the laser beam, and shoots the power button on the TV remote with his pistol. Shinzo compliments Asano's skills, but Asano says he still can't change the channel. Just then, Shion walks in with a progress report on Asano's training since he arrived. That night, Nanao teaches Asano how to escape from a gas trap. Asano even handles poisoned food. However, Asano turns pale when he drinks milk and rushes into the bathroom, still stuck outside because he doesn't know the code. Suddenly, they notice something is wrong and find Asano unconscious on the floor. Futaba immediately takes Asano to the clinic, where she discovers that he has a fever due to exhaustion. She suddenly realizes something and tears off Asano's outer skin. It turns out that Asano was wearing a full bodysuit to cover up the bruises from intense training. Asano didn't want Mutsumi to worry, so he asked Kingo to make him a full bodysuit. While Nanao treated Asano, she said that his results were extraordinary and that no one could achieve such results without pushing themselves to the brink of death. She told Asano to take it easy and gave him a book on decoding. She said that Asano needed to rest until he finished reading the book. Only then was he allowed to continue practicing. Another week passed, and Asano finally opened the bathroom door. Everyone cheered and lifted Asano up to celebrate that he had finally passed the Yozakura family membership test and was accepted by the computer. But Asano's joy was short-lived when Shinzo brought out a 100 kilograms weight vest and said that he could handle more now. Futaba also increased the difficulty of the traps from normal to hard. Asano realizes that his journey has only just begun, and he still has a long way to go to protect himself and Mutsumi. The next morning, Mutsumi is cooking breakfast while Asano walks into the kitchen wearing her bra. She looks at Asano as if he is a strange creature and declares that she does not mind playing the role of her husband's sister and will never divorce him no matter what. Asano quickly explains that she misunderstood and that he was just practicing his disguise as a spy. Suddenly, a beautiful girl in a yellow outfit appeared at the door and asked if everything was okay. Asano didn't know who she was, but Mutsumi immediately recognized her as Kengo. Kengo grabbed Asano and pressed the young man's head against two large silicone cannons, but Mutsumi pulled him away, fearing for her husband's safety. Soon after, Kyo Ishiro also entered the kitchen and asked Mutsumi for a kiss before he went to work. Since she was already irritated, she decided to give both men a bump on the head. Later that day, Asano met Shinzo, who was about to go on a solo mission. Asano asked if the mission was dangerous, but Shinzo said it was a low-risk task since he only needed to gather information about an illegal counterfeiting operation, and it wouldn't take much time. Asano wished him good luck and went to school with Mutsumi. As they were leaving the school building, they encountered a ball moving at high speed that nearly hit Asano in the head. However, Asano didn't even glance and simply caught the ball, then threw it back with equal speed. In the late afternoon, Asano and Mutsumi went up to the rooftop for lunch. Mutsumi mentioned that, although Asano might not realize it, his strength and skills had significantly improved due to the training. Now, Asano moved so quietly that everyone thought he was a ninja. She then asked if Asano was free after school because she needed his help with a few things. Asano agreed, and they returned home. Mutsumi sat down at her desk, stamping a pile of paperwork. She asked Asano to review the documents. She worked quickly to check and identify errors and issues in the paperwork. She turned Asano into an unpaid assistant, instructing him to email several investors to boost their stocks, and also asked him to discard a fake divorce paper created by Kyoichiro to create a rift between the couple. While reviewing the documents, she noticed that a report from Kingo seemed incomplete. Asano had done this before, so she immediately became angry and sent him to Kingo's room. The room was filled with a heap of clothes, making it nearly impossible to see anything else inside. Mutsumi told Kingo to get out quickly, and Kingo suddenly emerged from the pile of clothes. Mutsumi scolded him to finish the report and submit it to her immediately. Kingo, unperturbed, calmly ate sushi while dismissing her complaints. Kingo told his sister to act her age and not like an old woman. She lost her temper and decided to punish Kengo according to Yozakura family tradition. Kengo, realizing things were getting tense, decided to escape from the room. Thanks to his training, Asano was much faster and blocked his way immediately. However, Kengo cleverly disguised himself as Mutsumi, causing Asano to drop his guard. Kengo then ran past Asano and out of the house. Mutsumi, enraged, activated the house's dormancy mode to completely block all exits, and giant walls began to rise around the house. She told Asano that no matter how fast he would not escape the house once this mode was activated. Meanwhile, Shinzo was bypassing ventilation shafts when he discovered a large-scale counterfeiting operation being run by a millionaire who had introduced 60% of the counterfeit money into circulation. Shinzo went through the vents and realized that the perpetrators were working with a genius, as the security measures in place were extremely sophisticated. Shinzo wore an Apple Vision Pro, which, unlike in real life, actually worked to help him see through containers to locate counterfeit money. Shinzo descended to a trapdoor to find a way to access the safe, entered the correct code, and retrieved a framed piece of counterfeit money, which seemed quite important. However, before Shinzo could do anything else, an alarm suddenly went off, and he had to flee immediately. Back at the Yozakura house, Mutsumi was checking every room. She used infrared equipment to search for traces of Kengo in each room, but found nothing. Asano was surprised by his wife's refined tastes and noticed a new painting she had created. They then went to Shion's room, where he was alone, reminiscing about his childhood by practicing a handstand. Next, they visited Nanao's room, where he threatened to throw acid at Kengo if he saw him. Finally, they reached Kyoichiro's room and were shocked to see that the entire room was decorated with pictures of Mutsumi. Asano wondered if Kengo had escaped, but Mutsumi said that was impossible since the house had been sealed. Suddenly, other family members in the house met Mutsumi and Asano and were asked if they had found Kengo. Asano suddenly heard something and turned around, seeing Kengo's face clearly in a Mona Lisa painting. It turned out that Kengo had been hiding in the frame all along. Kengo immediately darted across the room, but Asano continued to chase him until he suddenly screamed and fell. Mutsumi rushed over to check and found her husband lying on the floor, rubbing his head. Asano said that Kengo had thrown the picture frame at his head and then ran into a nook in the wall. Mutsumi, frustrated, shouted that Kengo must have found a way to escape the house's seal and angrily went back to Kengo's room. She said she would remove the seal to avoid further trouble. However, as soon as Asano entered the room, she immediately handcuffed him. She said she wasn't that naive and knew that Kengo had been impersonating her husband all along. She asserted that there was no way Asano could have escaped the seal, so Kengo must have trapped Asano somewhere and was impersonating him to make Mutsumi give up and remove the seal to let him escape. Kengo admitted defeat and removed his disguise, and the two of them then searched for the documents she needed. At the end of the day, Asano enjoyed a curry cooked by Mutsumi. He found the dish very delicious because it was made by his wife. Asano asked about the secret ingredient, and Mutsumi replied, "Cyanide, not love." Asano's stomach began to churn, and he asked his wife for permission to take a call. Asano picked up the phone and heard Shinzo on the other end calling for help. They switched to a video call, and Shinzo was crying, saying he had gotten caught in a gunfight. Shinzo was surprised by the number of enemies and had run out of bullets, with no other weapons available. Mutsumi told Asano that Shinzo was an extremely skilled agent, but since he relied solely on weapons, he would be helpless without them. She asked if Asano could bring weapons to Shinzo, and Asano immediately accepted the task. Asano dressed quickly and carried a small bag as he entered the highly secure building. Asano navigated through the hallways but, unfortunately, was not quick enough and was confronted by a guard with a gun pointed at his head. Remembering his training, Asano managed to push the gun away and deliver a sharp blow to the guard's face. Hearing the commotion, a group of guards rushed to the scene. Asano kneeled one guard in the face, but was then captured by another. As another guard tried to negotiate with him, Asano, fortunately, was wearing protective gear and managed to knock out the guard in front and incapacitate the one behind him. Surprisingly, another guard arrived, but Asano swiftly grabbed the gun Shinzo had sent and used it to stun the guard, rendering him immobilized. Finally, Asano found Shinzo, who immediately embraced Asano like a lifeline and rubbed the gun Asano had brought. Suddenly, a few more guards entered the room, but Shinzo's demeanor changed completely once he had the gun. He swiftly took down all the guards and handed Asano a framed piece of counterfeit money. Shinzo then exited the room and dealt with the remaining guards as if it were a video game, throwing a grenade at the last group and shooting it in midair. Shinzo escorted Asano out of the building, but Asano was shot in the leg by a sniper. Asano fell to the ground, bleeding, and the sniper demanded Shinzo drop his weapon. Shinzo complied to ensure Asano's safety and dropped the gun. Asano suddenly recalled that his wife had taught him that Shinzo could turn anything into a weapon as long as he could handle it. Asano quickly threw a plate towards Shinzo. Shinzo caught it and used it to block the sniper's gun barrel, giving him enough time to retrieve his own weapon and take down the enemy, saving Asano. As night fell, Shinzo carried Asano on his back as they made their way home. Asano thanked Shinzo for saving his life, and Shinzo thanked him in return. Asano said he might have died if not for Shinzo's rescue. Meanwhile, a vagrant entered another facility and used a hammer to beat up each guard there, asking where the leader was. When the guards refused to reveal any information, the vagrant killed them all and pulled out a photo of the next target, who was coincidentally Asano. Several days passed since the harrowing shootout at the factory with Shinzo, and Asano's leg had healed quite a bit. One day, Asano walked down a deserted street. It was dark, but Asano's face still lit up as he talked on the phone with his wife. She was telling Asano about a special Ferris wheel in their city. There was a rumor that long ago, a couple had a huge argument. It was said to be the worst fight they had ever had. But after they rode the Ferris wheel, they forgot all about their argument and fell in love with each other again. Since then, the Ferris wheel had been known as the matchmaking Ferris wheel. Asano chuckled, finding this story both amusing and a bit cheesy. Mutsumi continued, saying she wanted to spend a day there with Asano on their next day off. She wanted to ride the Ferris wheel because there was a rumor that couples who watched the sunset from there would be happy forever. Asano blushed when he heard her say that, but his smile faded as he noticed a white sedan parked by the side of the road. He watched intently as a man stepped out of the car. The man wore a tattered gray outfit and had his hair covering most of his face. Asano stood calmly, staring at the mysterious figure with a dark demeanor. The man slowly turned to make eye contact with him. Mutsumi noticed that Asano had stopped responding and called his name. Asano, with a serious tone, said he needed to hang up immediately and moved the phone away. The man approached Asano and asked for his name to confirm his identity. Asano felt uneasy, as the stranger knew his name, and continued to observe him as the man pulled out a police ID from his jacket. He introduced himself as Hotokeji Yama, a police officer from the Koizumi district. Without further explanation, he asked Asano if he would mind coming to the police station with him. Unable to refuse, Asano reluctantly agreed and went to the police station. He was taken to a dark interrogation room, with only a small lamp providing light. Without wasting time, Hotokeji Yama took out a laptop and showed Asano a photo from the dark web. It was an image of Asano from a fight that had occurred a few days ago. Seeing the photo made Asano shiver and go pale, realizing that this picture could be found by anyone online. The Yozakura family had assured Asano that they were always careful in hiding their activities and secret missions, so how could his photo end up on the dark web? Hotokeji Yama continued to show Asano more images, clearly depicting him using illegal weapons, setting fires, and trespassing on private property. There were also pictures of a car chase on a public road, with the car being driven by a dog. He even had evidence of a bomb explosion at Asano's school. Asano thought to himself that he wasn't even involved in half of these incidents, but he decided to remain silent as Hotokeji Yama interrogated him and accused him of these crimes. Hotokeji Yama continued, saying that he had been in the profession long enough to know that a high school kid like Asano couldn't possibly be orchestrating such large-scale criminal activities. He was surprised because they didn't have any photographic or video evidence of any accomplices. He believed that Asano was working with a secret organization involved in these criminal activities. He promised Asano that if he provided valuable information, they would reduce his sentence for cooperating with the police. He pressed Asano to reveal all the secrets he knew and the identities of those Asano was working with, but Asano knew that informants didn't live long. Thinking of the Yozakura siblings, Asano with determined eyes declared that he knew nothing. Hotokeji Yama swung the hammer at Asano, but Asano pulled his hand away and the wall was shattered, sparing his hands. However, Asano's eyes widened when Kyoichiro suddenly appeared with a trademark Joker-like smile. It turned out that Hotokeji Yama was an old friend of Kyoichiro's, who had been helping them cover up the Yozakura family's activities. The whole thing had been a test to assess Asano's loyalty and resistance. Asano passed the test with flying colors, and even Hotokeji Yama, who usually kept a stern demeanor, was impressed with Asano. The next day at school, Kyoichiro, still holding the title of vice, entered the classroom. Asano was so exhausted that he could barely keep his eyes open. and the silence in the classroom made him want to collapse onto his desk and fall asleep. Just seconds after Asano decided to close his eyes, he felt a piece of chalk flying towards his head at high speed. Asano swiftly dodged, and the chalk pierced through the wall behind him, bringing him back to full alertness. Kyoichiro, with a smirk, said that Asano needed to train himself to resist drowsiness, or he would keep throwing chalk until Asano woke up. Mitsumi, determined to not let her brother-in-law continue tormenting her husband, decided to intervene. However, Asano accepted the challenge from his brother-in-law. Kyoichiro slammed a chalkboard eraser down, creating a thick cloud of smoke that put the whole class to sleep. Mitsumi was unaffected due to her gas mask. Asano fell asleep, but even in this state, his well-trained body could react and block the flying chalk. Since the training went smoothly, Asano was assigned his first mission. He was to go to an amusement park to locate a couple suspected of carrying a weapon. Asano's covert task was to find and retrieve their weapon. As Asano was at the park, Mitsumi also showed up and said she would assist him with the mission. Asano was pleased to have her there and hoped that today would be the perfect date for her to see him as a good husband. They observed several suspicious couples, following them on roller coasters and other amusement park rides. Asano closely watches one particular couple in couple outfits who are handing out food around the park. Asano takes a moment to pick a rose for Mitsumi as a gesture of affection. The first two couples seem harmless, so they decide to focus on the last couple, who are dressed in formal attire at a restaurant. Mitsumi goes to get them drinks, and Asano notices the man in the couple pull a small box out of his jacket. Asano readies his weapon, preparing for a confrontation, but it turns out that the man is about to propose, and inside the box is an engagement ring. Asano is about to relax when he hears a commotion from the arguing couple. They are arguing loudly, and the man runs away from the table. The woman suddenly pulled out a gun and pointed it at the man, who retaliated by drawing his own weapon. Panic spread as the restaurant patrons scrambled for the exit, but Mitsumi was caught in the crowd. The couple began shooting at each other, and bullets flew everywhere. Asano ducked under the table to protect a boy hiding below. Asano pulled out his gun and quickly took down the crazed couple with just 2 shots. They were arrested by the police, and Asano was hailed as the hero of the day. To cap off their visit to the amusement park, Asano and Mitsumi rode the matchmaking Ferris wheel. Asano gave Mitsumi the rose he had picked, which had been slightly damaged in the chaos. She blushed as she accepted it, and the Ferris wheel rose high enough to perfectly view the sunset. If the rumors were true, they might be lucky enough to find eternal happiness. A few days later, it was discovered that someone had hacked into the Yozakura family's files to get information about the family members over the past 4 days. Shion worked tirelessly for several nights to get the hacker out of their server. After a while, she managed to trap the hacker in a hacking program. However, the hacker cleverly cut off the power to their computer to avoid being caught. Shion thought she had finally defeated the hacker, but it seemed that the hacker had gotten most of the files related to Asano. Shion finally took a break. When she came out of her room, she saw both Asano and Mitsumi getting ready for school. She informed them that the hacker had targeted their files several times to get information about Asano, but she had saved and updated the system. Asano felt uneasy and worried that trouble might be coming, but he decided not to worry too much for now. They left the house, and on the way to school, Asano suddenly sensed danger and pushed Mitsumi out of the way just in time to avoid some sharp objects falling to the ground. Asano spotted a slender figure behind a nearby pillar and decided to run away with Mitsumi. Asano tried to move through some alleys but couldn't escape his pursuers, so he had to confront them. Asano readied his taser as he looked down the alley, but the attacker came from above. Asano managed to block the attack and push the girl away. The attacker seemed interested that Asano was not as weak as rumored. She suddenly declared her love for Asano and her desire to kill him. Mitsumi recognized her and informed Asano that the assassin's name was Kirisaki. Kirisaki was known for carrying a bunch of needles and was infamous as a hunter. She specialized in stalking her targets and killing them with her needles. Kirisaki, angered by Mitsumi's use of the term hunter to describe her, warned her not to use such vulgar language or she would blind her. She admitted to being infatuated with Asano ever since she first saw him in a video on the dark web. From that day on, she became obsessed with him. She revealed that Asano had become a celebrity in the underworld, and she produced a flyer offering a $100 reward for his capture. Kirisaki expressed her concern for Asano's safety and threw several needles into the air. A man dropped from above with a gun in hand. She announced that many others were pursuing Asano for the reward. But unlike them, she only killed for love. not money. Kurosaki knew everything about Asano, including his reluctance to damage plants even during missions and his tendency to pay for repairs and tickets. Mutsumi agreed that her husband was truly amazing, and Kurosaki begged Asano to come live with her forever. Asano calmly backed away, stating that he could not do that as he was married to Mutsumi and would never leave her. Kurosaki started to cry fake tears and accused Mutsumi of being a seductress brainwashing Asano to stay with her. Asano was enraged but remained silent as Kurosaki declared her intention to kill Mutsumi and take Asano with her. Unexpectedly, Kyoichiro interfered, stating that no one would harm even a single hair of his sister. The newlywed couple was shocked, and Mutsumi wondered if Kyoichiro had known about this all along. Kurosaki revealed that no one dared to target a Yozakura family member without informing Kyoichiro, so she had asked for his permission to kill Asano, which Kyoichiro had granted. He was the one who had given her the security code to Asano's files, which allowed her to hack the data. Kurosaki then spun around and threw needles at them, but they all landed around them, deliberately demonstrating her skills. She told Asano she would see him later and jumped away, leaving the attackers behind. The next day at school, the teacher announced that a new student was transferred in. To everyone's surprise, the new student was none other than Kurosaki. She greeted everyone extremely warmly, and the boys in class were immediately smitten. The teacher assigned her to sit next to Asano, who immediately felt nervous. As Kurosaki approached her seat, she deliberately tripped and shot a needle at Asano's face. But fortunately, Asano quickly used a notebook to shield herself. From that moment on, Asano's days became a game for Kurosaki. She covered the entire seating area with poisonous needles and even hid a needle in her pencil to poke him. Asano was quite used to Kurosaki's pranks and had adapted perfectly to dodging her needles. During lunch with Mutsumi, Asano was able to dodge all of Kurosaki's needles without looking. After a period of intense mental and physical battle, Asano and Kurosaki were both exhausted. One day, in a moment of desperation, Kurosaki threw countless needles into the air, causing her classmates to collapse instantly. Kurosaki claimed that her technique allowed her to control anyone, and ordered the entire class to join in attacking Asano. Not wanting to harm innocent people, Asano was restrained by her classmates, while Kurosaki prepared to finish him off. However, at the last minute, Mutsumi appeared and stopped her. The window then suddenly opens and the assassin Kurosaki knocked out opens fire. But Mutsumi quickly pushes Kurosaki down, though a bullet grazes and cuts off a strand of her hair. Enraged, Asano pushes the students away and electrocutes the attacker, knocking him to the ground. Asano rushes to check on Mutsumi. Kurosaki is confused that Mutsumi saved her, but Mutsumi simply says that she is glad that someone other than her recognizes Asano's efforts. Kurosaki immediately changes her target, and now aims to kill Asano to claim Mutsumi for herself. Asano is not happy with this new development, but Mutsumi suggests that they should consider Kurosaki as their new little sister. A few days later, Shion invites Asano to her room to play a game, which will also be part of Asano's training. Mutsumi says that Shion is an extreme gamer, and the last time Shinzo played with her, he stayed up 3 nights in a row and was exhausted. Asano begins playing the game with Shion, who takes the lead in defeating the enemies while Asano is still learning the combos. They quickly reach the final boss, which is a steam train. They both press buttons continuously and finally complete the level when the train's engine stops. Suddenly, a news report appears, with a reporter reporting that a train has been hijacked. The train carrying hundreds of innocent lives has stopped on its own, and all the hijackers are unconscious. Asano realizes that Shion has converted real-life missions into the game without extra lives or restart options. This puts more pressure on Asano as they prepare for the next mission. The mission is even more dangerous as a group of terrorists have taken control of a helicopter with the intention of flying it into a nuclear power plant, with the intention of recreating the Chernobyl disaster. Shion instructs Asano to do his best while navigating the complex terrain and attacking the enemies. However, Asano, due to his lack of experience, struggles to overcome the obstacles and gets stuck. Unable to figure out how to proceed, Asano accidentally slides off the wall, causing the game to crash. Shion continues towards the final boss, jumps into the air and delivers the finishing blow, taking the boss down on the spot. Surprisingly, the battle is not over yet as the terrorists have a backup plan. They launch hundreds of drones at once, aiming to destroy the power plant. Asano and Shion must quickly find a way to resolve this situation and prevent the impending disaster. Even Shion was convinced that the situation was dire, but Asano cleverly revived the boss with a vial of medicine and used it to destroy the enemy forces. Kurosaki also lent her support, playing from her computer. The three of them successfully eliminated all the drones and thwarted the terrorist attack. However, Shion was displeased because Asano had exploited the PUBG game. As a result, she forced Asano to play games with her for 2 consecutive nights. Afterward, Asano endured the same grueling fate as Shinzo, suffering and wondering what the next mission would be. A few days later, one morning, while Asano was doing push UPS with a 500 kilograms weight on his back, he received a call from Nanao asking for help. Asano inquired about the situation, and Nanao explained that he was currently on a top-secret mission in a dangerous laboratory where scientists were attempting to create a devastating biological weapon. Nanao revealed that they had developed a pill that, if detonated, could instantly kill everyone within a 10 kilometers radius. Although Asano found the situation serious, Nanao casually mentioned that this was routine for spies. Nanao told Asano that he had used chemicals to put the laboratory staff into a deep sleep, but he felt it was unsafe to take the biological weapon out. Instead, he decided to swallow the pill himself for dramatic effect, explaining that the human body has many natural defense mechanisms, and his own body was particularly adept at handling such threats, making it likely he could neutralize it easily. The only downside is that the detoxification process will make him extremely sleepy. Nanao needed Asano to retrieve him from the secret laboratory because he couldn't let the scientists find him while he was asleep. Asano immediately asked for Nanao's location, but the young man only provided vague information before falling asleep. Asano dressed quickly and headed to the laboratory. He managed to get inside the central area of the lab but found it unusually easy, as he hadn't encountered any guards so far. Asano rounded a corner and saw a group of guards unconscious on the floor. He decided to proceed with caution, gun at the ready. Asano wondered if Nanao was responsible for this, but he didn't think Nanao would resort to such violence. While moving through the area, Asano suddenly heard a guard approaching, but before he could react, a wire shot out and knocked the guard unconscious. 2 young men emerged from the shadows. They seemed to recognize Asano and asked if he was there on a mission. The blue-haired young man named Aoi Sui approached Asano and introduced his companion, Inugami Oga, explaining that both worked for a government intelligence agency. Asano recalls hearing about these government agents, reputed to be among the highest echelon in the spy world. Unlike many freelance spy groups, Sui declared that they had been sent to neutralize the laboratory and asked Oga if he had detected anything. Oga, with his extraordinary senses, immediately picked up on the presence of enemies. Sui moved forward and wished Asano good luck, but Oga decided to grab Asano, declaring that they might need additional allies. Asano was exasperated by this makeshift alliance, but at least he knew they were not enemies. The 3 of them effortlessly took down the guards and finally entered the laboratory. Asano immediately stepped in and saw Nanao lying on the ground. Asano checked and found that the young man was still alive but in very poor condition. Suddenly, a chain flew towards him, but Asano quickly used his knife to deflect it. The knife broke upon impact, and Asano's arm was injured. Asano asked the 2 young men why they had turned against him. Sui explained that they were sent to take out the laboratory and had overheard Asano's conversation with Nanao. They knew that Nanao had swallowed the biological weapon and was now a threat that needed to be dealt with. Asano stepped in front of Nanao, clearly stating that they would have to go through him. Asano drew his gun, but Oga told him not to do that. Sui was not interested in negotiations and used the thunder-breathing technique taught by Zenitsu to move through Asano with blinding speed, cutting both the gun and Asano himself. Asano fell to the ground, bleeding heavily. Oga was furious with Sui for solving the problem with violence, but Sui told Oga not to let emotions control him and moved to kill Nanao. With his last bit of strength, Asano pleaded with Sui to spare Nanao, but Sui showed no mercy and drew his sword. Suddenly, Nanao woke up, claiming he had neutralized the poison and that they could test his sweat on a test strip. Nanao told Sui that if he still intended to kill him, at least let him bandage Asano so his brother-in-law could live. Sui coldly replied that if the poison had been neutralized, they had no reason to bother with the siblings, and took the test strip. Sui left behind an ointment to heal Asano's wounds. Nanao immediately went to Asano and told him to stay calm, but Asano was too badly injured and lost consciousness. A few days later, Asano was fortunate to survive, but was still punished by Kyoichiro. Asano was suspended above a pile of candles like a roast pig, as reports claimed that the Yozakura family had been fed misinformation by government spies. The reporters asserted that this was evidence of the family's downfall, causing Kyoichiro to be furious and dismayed by the judgment. Before Kyoichiro could impose further punishment, Mutsumi and Nanao rushed in to rescue the beleaguered Asano. Mutsumi reassured Asano not to worry, but Asano admitted he deserved it for tarnishing the Yozakura family's name. Kyoichiro turned Asano around, stating that Asano could make amends by defeating the government spies to avenge the family. He said that the Yozakura family members had to possess exceptional skills to become top-tier spies. In the ongoing battle between spies, the key was information, so Asano needed to steal intelligence from them. The next day, Asano followed Sui, but Sui used his sword to shred the clothes of a nearby bystander before approaching Asano and asking what he wanted. Asano was surprised at his own blatant disguise and honestly admitted that he had come to learn from Sui. Sui dismissed this and told Asano to do whatever he liked. Sui then left, walking at lightning speed, forcing Asano to run to keep up. Asano tried to chase Sui by leaping over crowds, but Sui cut up Asano's clothes again, leading Asano to be taken to the police station for indecent exposure. The next day, Asano tried to follow Sui again while on a train, but Sui once more cut up Asano's outfit. On the third day, Asano was clinging to the roof of a building, while Sui and Oga had a calm lunch. After finishing, Sui shredded Asano's clothes once again before leaving. On the following day, Asano pursued them until the evening when both were fighting a group of thugs. Asano also helped defeat the enemies, and Oga noticed that Asano was quite capable, but Sui still intended to expose him again. This time, Asano managed to dodge the attack, trying to preserve his modesty by ensuring his pants stayed intact. Oga laughed at him, causing Sui to lose his temper and strip both young men of their dignity right then and there. In the evening, Nanao went to the kitchen and saw Kyoichiro slicing vegetables. Nanao asked if he had seen Asano, and Kyoichiro replied that Asano was still outside naked as usual. Nanao asked if Kyoichiro had brought Asano inside, but Kyoichiro said that this worthless person was only fit to be a chopping board for him. Nanao pushed Kyoichiro aside and helped Asano sit up. Asano apologized to Nanao for being so weak. Nanao said that Asano was a remarkable person because he always did things in his unique way. This suddenly made Asano realize something about Sui, and he continued to follow him on another day. This time, Asano tried to follow Sui for an entire day. As night fell, Sui carried out his final task of cleaning a tombstone and praised Asano for being the first to track him for an entire day. Since Asano deserved respect within the industry, Sui decided it was time to eliminate him. Asano drew his sword and attacked Sui as he had many times before. But this time, Asano caught Sui's hand and pinned it down, then threw him straight up into the air. Asano realized after many attacks that Sui's initial strikes always aimed at the center of his body, which was a predictable habit. Sui easily got back up, while Asano remained standing, wounded and bleeding. Sui praised Asano and instructed Oga, who had been lurking nearby, to come out and tend to Asano's injuries. Oga quickly rushed to help Asano, finally receiving permission from the normally stoic Sui. Before long, people had forgotten about Asano being exposed by Sui, but the spy magazines noticed Asano's repeated exposure incidents and labeled him as a pervert. Asano was frustrated but didn't know how to refute the accusations. In the end, things turned out fine because Mutsumi promised Asano that she would always love him wholeheartedly, even if he turned out to be a pervert. A few days passed, and one morning, Mutsumi asked Asano if he could help with a bit of errand work. Naturally, Asano agreed right away. Asano walked through a well-known park, wondering what kind of errand required him to carry such a huge backpack, feeling like a thief. Mutsumi told him not to worry and continued walking. When they reached a bench, a familiar face with green hair was waiting there. Sui greeted them curtly, and Mutsumi asked how Asano had been lately. Asano, puzzled, asked what was going on. Mutsumi explained that they had some tasks with Sui, which was why she was there. Asano still looked confused and asked if she knew who this guy was. Sui smiled and told Asano not to worry, because he and Mutsumi were just friends. However, the last time he heard Asano's name, he felt like he had grown 5 centimeters. Mutsumi said that making friends with people in the espionage field was normal. The three of them continued walking, with Sui and Mutsumi chatting away while Asano trailed behind, burdened by the giant backpack. Before long, they entered a place that looked like a regular cafe. Asano was bewildered, thinking they were on a serious mission, but he followed them inside. Inside, the cafe looked pretty standard. Sui ordered a coffee with 8 billion types of toppings, making Asano fear that the barista might come out with a broom to chase them away. Mutsumi stood by with a smile. and soon after the owner pressed a button and a trap door opened beneath them, causing them to fall. Asano fell alone with the enormous backpack he was carrying, while Sui was carrying Mutsumi like a princess and chatting with her. Mutsumi welcomed them to the government spy headquarters, and Asano angrily told Sui to get his hand off his wife. Mutsumi reassured Asano not to worry, they were just friends. Even so, Asano could still feel his height noticeably increasing. Sue pulled out a tea set from somewhere and calmly sipped, advising Asano to look elsewhere because danger was approaching. Suddenly, a barrage of arrows flew past Asano's head, followed by more arrows, darts, spikes, and high-powered laser beams. Sui mentioned that these were designed as both a security measure for intruders and basic training for agents. Sui smoothly dodged the arrows and darts with his sword, while Asano was jumping around like a wild monkey trying to avoid them. Soon, Sui landed gracefully with Mutsumi, while Asano crashed face first into the ground. Sui immediately told Asano to move aside as a giant metal ball appeared and hit him. But at the last moment, a woman intervened, causing the ball to shatter. Asano stared at her with wide eyes, and she asked how someone as weak as Asano could protect Mutsumi. They all sat down, and it turned out that the huge backpack Asano had been carrying only contained sweets for the three of them to have a chat. The woman ate all the cakes, while Sui nibbled delicately on his share. Asano was still in shock, not understanding what the hell had just happened. Mutsumi eventually explained that the woman was named Jin, and that she was Kyoichiro's classmate. However, they didn't get along well and were always like cats and dogs. The one thing they did have in common was their eternal love for Mutsumi. Jin had looked at Mutsumi for a while and then turned to Asano, squeezing his face and saying that she had hoped her younger sister would end up with a formidable young man, not this weak, timid one. She mentioned that Sui had recounted their meeting and noted that Asano had called himself pathetically weak. But Sui had corrected him, saying that Asano was indeed weak, not just in appearance. Mutsumi defended Asano, stating that although he was still inexperienced, his spirit and determination were as strong as Kyoichiro's. Before the two could continue their bickering, the walls suddenly shook and collapsed from one side. Amid the debris and smoke, Kyoichiro emerged, furious because they had kidnapped Mutsumi without asking him first. Jin walked toward him and told him to wait to pick up his sister because they were busy having a discussion. Kyoichiro, enraged, prepared to cut her with a wire. However, Jin was strong enough to break the wire with a single punch. The two were ready to go at it today. They prepared and attacked each other, their movements so fast that Asano could no longer see them. Due to the intensity of their battle, the entire facility began to collapse, and the alarm system went off, signaling staff to evacuate immediately. Mutsumi told Asano that this was a regular occurrence, which startled him, while Sui calmly said they should fall back so he could try to stop them. Sui rushed in at lightning speed, drawing his sword, but he was no match for these two. They knocked Sui aside and continued their fierce combat. Suddenly, Mutsumi jumped in front of them, standing between them to force them to stop. But it was too late. Both Kyoichiro and Jin were already in the midst of their relentless assault. Fortunately, Asano managed to intervene at the last moment and received a free jaw surgery. Asano fell into Mutsumi's arms, and the atmosphere suddenly became silent. Mutsumi gently spoke, warning that if they didn't stop fighting, she would consider both of them non-existent. The statement hit like a thunderbolt, causing Kyoichiro to immediately faint while Jin knelt down and apologized. Jin then looked at Asano and praised him for daring to intervene and take the hit for his wife. Mutsumi smiled and said that Asano was indeed strong, even if he didn't look like it on the outside. A while later, when Asano woke up, Jin mentioned that she had a job for him. She wanted Asano to carry out some secret investigations against a prominent politician. While Mutsumi was tying up her brother, Jin explained that the politician's name was Kuroyuri. He had made quite a splash with the public and might win the upcoming election. This wasn't the real issue. It turned out that the young man was a villain. Despite his eccentric style and his tendency to dance during speeches, he had top-notch spies working for him named Red, Blue, and Yellow. They were his loyal henchmen, tasked with extortion, purchasing, and murder of his opponents. The government spies had tried to gather more information about the politician, but all they found was a very small bomb, likely purchased from abroad for assassinating opposition leaders. They had identified the seller of the bomb, but when they interrogated him, he only provided a video of the anonymous buyer. Asano was astonished when he watched the video, clearly showing the politician. However, Jin said it wasn't enough evidence to arrest him yet. Asano asked why she had chosen him for this mission. and she explained that they had been monitoring him for some time, and now he was very cautious about government spies. However, he might not suspect an outsider, especially someone who has just married into a spy family like him. She said they would need to change Asano's appearance a bit. Sui quickly cut his hair, while Mutsumi dyed it black and had Asano dress in a secretary's uniform. Asano looked at his new appearance and wondered if he would be playing the part of the Danish girl with his real wife. Jin mentioned that Kuroyuri had recently posted an advertisement for a secretary with a similar appearance, so he would definitely hire Asano. The plan worked, and at the next public appearance, Kuroyuri introduced Asano as his new personal secretary. The event continued with loud music and dancing until suddenly a group of protesters stormed the stage, shouting that Kuroyuri was a tyrant. They warned that if he wasn't stopped, he would become the next Hitler. Things quickly escalated, and a scuffle broke out. A large speaker fell and nearly landed on one of the protesters, but to everyone's surprise, Kuroyuri rushed to take the impact for him. He declared that the public was everything to him, and he wanted everyone to criticize him so he could improve and progress. This gesture touched the protesters' hearts. They shook hands while those around them cheered for him. Soon after, an ambulance was called, and Kuroyuri, with a bloodied face, was placed on a stretcher. He told Asano to return to the office while he went in the ambulance with the spies. Once out of sight, he removed his bandages and celebrated the success of his media stunt. He praised Red for placing the speaker perfectly and asked Blue for the statistics and public opinions. He discovered that the public had come to like him more after his staged act of heroism. Little did they know, Asano had overheard everything while sneaking into the office to search for evidence of Kuroyuri's illegal activities. Asano rummaged through documents and everything in the office. Asano was always around them, but still couldn't find any illegal documents. Surprisingly, they continued to commit crimes throughout the election campaign with incredible coordination. Asano couldn't understand how they did it because they never planned or discussed anything like that. They spent all day dancing and partying, making Asano's life as a daughter-in-law even more miserable. Suddenly, Asano remembered their dance and rhythm. Annoyed that he had to disguise himself for duty, he didn't pay much attention until he overheard their code and found out that they were planning to set off a bomb at a conference the next day where the current prime minister would be present. They planned to commit the terrorist act while Kuroyuri was there, pretending to have nothing to do with it. He planned to pretend to be injured and give a speech declaring that he would save the country and avenge the terrorists. Asano heard the entire plan. The next day, when everything was in place, Kuroyuri tried to detonate the bomb, but to everyone's surprise, nothing happened. Instead, a bomb exploded in the fountain because the main guy didn't know which wire to cut and threw the bomb away. However, Kuroyuri seemed to know what was going on and pulled out a gun, shooting Asano and taunting him with another bomb. He detonated the second bomb to kill the onlookers, but it only contained cotton candy. Kuroyuri was stunned for 5 seconds while Asano got up because Kuroyuri's gun had been replaced with a paintball gun. Kuroyuri pulled out another gun along with his agents, but Sui jumped in, disarming them. The agents ran away in fear, leaving Kuroyuri alone. He pulled out another gun, but Sui stripped the old man and handed him over to Asano to take him to their base. While in the car, Kuroyuri tells Asano that he knows every detail about his life and delivers shocking news. Asano's family did not die in the car accident. Asano is stunned when Kuroyuri continues to say that the accident was staged, and that, in fact, someone murdered Asano's family. Asano is stunned for a moment, then points a gun at the politician, demanding that he reveal all the information. Kuroyuri sneers, knowing that he has tricked Asano. Asano asks how he knows about his family, but Kuroyuri refuses to answer. Instead, he gives Asano a piece of advice, saying that the world is full of hidden truths. Suddenly, Asano receives a call from Sui about an emergency. The deputy prime minister has been kidnapped, and his condition is being broadcast live from an unknown location. It turns out to be an imposter, and Sui suspects that the old man Kuroyuri set this up from the start. Sui wants Asano to interrogate the politician and get him to reveal the location of the deputy prime minister. Kuroyuri overhears everything and says that it's convenient since he's planning to go to the kidnapping site. Suddenly, he breaks free from his restraints, and Asano is shocked to see his earring fall out. It turns out to be a bomb, blowing up the entire truck. Meanwhile, at the Yozakura villa, Nanao was experimenting with a new chemical. Unfortunately, the experiment went wrong, causing a massive explosion that shook the entire room. Mutsumi rushed into the room, wearing a gas mask, and asked if he was okay. Nanao apologized for wrecking the room, but Mutsumi told him to worry about himself first. With the mess growing on him, it looked like a mutant disaster. Nanao continued his work and mentioned to Mutsumi that he was concerned Asano might come home barely alive, so he was trying to create an extremely effective therapeutic drug. He asked Mutsumi if she was worried about her brother-in-law, to which she admitted she was very concerned. She had prepared a grand feast to welcome Asano home after he completed his mission. She believed that no matter how beaten up he was, he would be as strong as an ox after eating this meal. Nanao agreed with his sister. Mutsumi then inquired about the other family members. Nanao explained that Kengo was creating a fake mask for Asano in case his face was damaged, while Shion was preparing to hack into the haters' computers to prevent them from posting inappropriate comments if something happened to Asano. Shinzo was so worried about Asano that he refused to come out of the trash can. Kyoichiro and Futaba were calmly drinking tea. Futaba felt there was nothing to worry about, as Asano would complete his mission well, whereas Kyoichiro didn't share that sentiment. He hoped that the brat would die a miserable death without even having the chance to regret. Hearing their calmness, Mutsumi also relaxed a bit, but she was still anxious about her husband. At the explosion site, Asano was assisting the injured driver and getting him away from the flames. He received a call from Sui, who asked if he was still alive. Asano assured him that he was unharmed and had managed to rescue the driver, but Kuroyuri had disappeared. Sui said that was not a problem because they had anticipated it. He revealed that they were still concealing Kuroyuri's true identity from Asano. Kuroyuri was not an ordinary politician, but a former renowned spy. Although everyone thought he had died 6 years ago, he had started a second career as a politician. This was why they had deliberately let him go to see what he would do. They had placed a GPS tracker on Kuroyuri, and Sui told Asano to go home to his wife since the mission was complete. Meanwhile, Kuroyuri removed the blindfold from the Deputy Prime Minister and sat down beside him. The meeting was being broadcast live nationwide, causing a frenzy among the media and the public. This was exactly Kuroyuri's goal from the start. The Deputy Prime Minister expressed his disappointment in Kuroyuri, who he had hoped would be a dedicated politician despite his apparent lack of intelligence. He told Kuroyuri that engaging in futile terrorism wouldn't give him any political advantage. Kuroyuri then removed his disguise, taking off his glasses, and the Deputy Prime Minister trembled at the sight of his pitch-black eyes. Kuroyuri revealed that the Deputy Prime Minister had assumed he was dead, which was why he hadn't suspected Kuroyuri's true identity earlier. The Deputy Prime Minister finally realized that Kuroyuri was the spy he had previously betrayed. Kuroyuri turned to the audience and announced that today, he would speak not as a politician, but as a man who had lost his child. He had sought revenge against the politicians behind the destruction of his family. However, the Deputy Prime Minister was the greatest culprit, so Kuroyuri intended to deliver justice before the entire world. Kuroyuri aimed his gun at him, asking whether he would reveal the truth to the world and end his political career or stubbornly choose death. The Deputy Prime Minister sneered, questioning if Kuroyuri had ever seen a politician tell the truth. Kuroyuri decided to finish him off right there. However, the broadcast feed was abruptly cut off because Asano had arrived in time to shoot down the broadcasting equipment. Kuroyuri was pleased that Asano had come to play along, but Asano told him to let the Deputy Prime Minister go. Kuroyuri was unaware that Asano wouldn't dare shoot him, as the Deputy Prime Minister would also be caught in the crossfire. Kuroyuri shot Asano in the hand, forcing him to drop his gun. However, Asano seized the opportunity to close the distance and grab Kuroyuri from behind. Kuroyuri was prepared and easily overpowered Asano, slamming him to the ground. He knew all about the weapons and combat techniques used by the Yozakura family, and even used the steel wires from Asano's bag to tie him up. Asano wondered how Kuroyuri knew so much, and Kuroyuri replied that it was because he was exceptionally skilled at gathering information and using it to his advantage. Asano asked Kuroyuri why someone as talented as him, a skilled spy, would turn to politics and deceive the public. Kuroyuri replied that he had no interest in politics, everything he did was purely for revenge. Asano grew more curious, and Kuroyuri explained that his exceptional skills earned him high regard in political circles. He carried out all the heinous tasks required by politicians, but when he was at home, he was just a clueless father who doted on his daughter. He would wear a wig and glasses to entertain her on her birthday. She had once laughed at him, asking why he had sent her a gift before the surprise. Kuroyuri was stunned, not knowing what to say, and then the gift box he had given her suddenly exploded, destroying their home. Kuroyuri lost his daughter in the explosion, and could only mourn her loss. He discovered that his former employer wanted to eliminate him because he had committed all their crimes. In that moment, he vowed to take revenge on everyone responsible, making them experience the same pain he had endured. That was why he faked his death and became a politician to exact his revenge. Kuroyuri explained that once he became a politician, using his influence to lure other politicians and kill them became quite easy. Kuroyuri aimed his gun at the deputy prime minister and declared that this man was the last one remaining. Asano suddenly lunged at him, but Kuroyuri's 3 bodyguard spies appeared out of nowhere to block him. Kuroyuri told Asano that he couldn't take them all on alone. He added that, knowing Asano shared his loss of loved ones, he didn't want to be cruel to him. Kuroyuri offered to reveal all the secrets about the death of Asano's family if Asano agreed to withdraw. Asano was momentarily swayed but soon declared that he wanted to know the truth about his family's death. However, he refused to sacrifice lives for it. At that moment, Sui arrived. Before anyone could react, he had carved a large hole in the floor, causing the 3 bodyguards and Sui to fall into the pit. He asked Asano to handle Kuroyuri and rescue the deputy prime minister. Asano attacked Kuroyuri, but Kuroyuri easily blocked the poison knife. He knew this trick and used the knife to stab Asano in return, causing Asano's muscles to go limp and rendering him powerless. Kuroyuri struck Asano again, leaving him bleeding on the floor. Despite Asano's efforts to stand up, Kuroyuri told him it was futile. Meanwhile, the 3 spies questioned Sui if he truly believed he could take them all on. They showcased their special abilities. Red specialized in fire, blue in high-pressure water capable of cutting through anything, and yellow used electricity, enough to cook a pig in no time. The trio acted like they were in a superhero movie and proclaimed their invincibility. Sui, unimpressed, decided to show his own skills. His technique allowed him to move extremely fast and silently, which proved useful in combat. The 3 spies combined their powers and launched a gigantic elemental sphere at Sui. Using a technique he had learned from the Demon Slayer sword, Sui sliced through the sphere in a single strike, defeating the 3 spies with one move. Afterward, he chose to assist Asano. Suddenly, Sui sensed someone behind him and swung his sword instinctively, but found nothing. However, Sui was certain that a powerful presence had been near. Meanwhile, Asano had managed to get back on his feet. Kuroyuri told Asano that the pain of losing his family would never fade. He said that Asano could not change his life or current situation. As Mutsumi was about to take a bite from her bowl, Kyoichiro suddenly stuffed a large mouthful of vegetables into Asano's mouth, causing him to choke and fall to the ground. Kyoichiro mocked Asano, saying that it was his honor to serve Mutsumi, not Asano's. He quickly grabbed a bowl of hot pot and told Mutsumi that he had put all her favorite ingredients into it. Jin, furious, slammed Kyoichiro's face into the bowl and yelled at him not to be a perverted creep and to keep his hands off her sister. Kyoichiro, naturally, refused to back down, and a food fight broke out between the two. The others had to quickly dodge flying food. Oga, starving and unwilling to waste good food, tried to grab a full bowl before it was all thrown away, but a piece of fish cake hit him in the face, knocking him unconscious. Meanwhile, Sui, with steady hands, deftly picked out the meat from the chaos and advised Asano that avoiding things that aren't aimed at you is quite easy. Sui used his silent step technique to fill 2 bowls with food and handed one to Mutsumi. She kept one for herself and gave the other to Asano, reminding him to be cautious with his silent step technique to avoid injury. Before Asano could react, a hot piece of meat unexpectedly hit him in the face, causing him to scream. Sui quickly chose the dishes he wanted from mid-air. Eventually, everyone was full, with Oga and Jin lying on the floor asleep while Sui cleaned up. Asano sat behind a shelf, looking at the small cube, wondering if it really contained the truth about his family's death as Kuroyuri had said. Mutsumi sat next to him and asked if the cube had any information about his family. Asano nodded, and she asked why he seemed so tense. Asano explained that although he had acted to save the deputy prime minister, there was a moment when he thought that if he discovered the perpetrator behind his family's death, he might become like Kuroyuri and dedicate his life to killing them. He feared that learning the secret might change him, making him someone he didn't want to be. Mutsumi, trying to comfort him, kissed his cheek. Asano was startled and asked why she did that. She smiled and said it was just to comfort him. When the cube opened, a small ball fell out. Asano grabbed the ball, puzzled by its significance. Kyoichiro suddenly appeared and explained that the ball was a special device containing optical information. Asano was about to thank Kyoichiro, but noticed that his brother-in-law was glaring at him with eyes full of blood, realizing that Kyoichiro was about to cause trouble. Fortunately, Jin quickly restrained him, telling Asano to stay away. That evening, Asano and Mutsumi returned home. As soon as Asano walked in, he felt extremely tired, as if he were being weighed down. He looked up and saw Kirisaki, the little assassin, standing on his head in a maid outfit. Asano asked what she was doing here, and Kirisaki explained that Mutsumi had invited her to stay and be their maid, handling daily chores. Kirisaki walked around, and Asano asked if she knew everything that had happened recently and about the ball he had. She confirmed that, as an agent, she had to know and took the ball from his pocket. Asano tried to retrieve it, but Shion entered the room, grabbed the ball from Kirisaki, and started examining it. Shion concluded that the ball was not only outdated but also slightly damaged and would take some time to extract data from. Meanwhile, Mutsumi called Kirisaki over to teach her how to brew tea. Asano wondered if hiring an assassin as a maid was a good idea, but Kirisaki advised him to appreciate her presence because, given his recent high-profile mission, there would likely be more assassination attempts. She would help Asano prepare by practicing dodging attacks daily. Kirisaki threw a set of forks at Asano, prompting him to reflect on his life. That night, Asano was exhausted from training and unable to move, lying slumped on the table. Mutsumi approached and made tea for him. He thanked her and said he wanted to take a shower first. When he entered the bathroom, Kirisaki suddenly emerged from the shower, startling him. She grabbed a shield and said that as an agent, one must always be vigilant, especially in vulnerable moments. Kirisaki continued to shoot, using an acid spray that melted through the wall. As Asano tried to avoid the acid, the house's defense system was triggered, and Kirisaki could only make confused sounds, warning Asano to stay away if he didn't want to learn Pikachu language. Asano attempted to rescue Kirisaki and break through the wall to find the main electrical outlet. He jumped into the bathtub, grabbing Kirisaki while holding onto the power source with his other hand. Kirisaki demanded he stay away, but Asano persisted and eventually cut off the power, creating a secondary explosion. He ended up lying on top of Kirisaki, and at that moment, his brother-in-law Kyoichiro saw them and was furious to see Asano in such a compromising situation with his sister. Kyoichiro grabbed a medieval torture device, unwilling to accept Asano's involvement with his sister, and Asano ran away, with Kyoichiro and Kirisaki in hot pursuit. A few days later, Asano undertook another task. On that very day, he forgot his phone, but when Mutsumi tried to give it back to him, she saw someone named Karu was calling. He immediately snatched it from her hand, said it was nothing, and turned off the phone before running outside. Mutsumi was unsure of what to do when Kirisaki suddenly appeared behind her, startling her. Kirisaki was crying and accusing Asano of cheating, claiming that he was coming home late, sometimes even turning off his location so no one could track him. He often received calls from unknown people and avoided her when she tried to follow him. She insisted this was a clear sign of infidelity, but Mutsumi trusted her husband and told her not to worry. The next day, Mutsumi took Goliath for a walk with Asano. She was happy to spend some time with him since he had been very busy lately. Asano smiled and asked what kind of creature Goliath was. Mutsumi explained that he was not an ordinary dog because he had lived through many generations of the Yozakura family and was the guardian dog of her great-grandmother. She claimed that Goliath was a rare hybrid of a mythical wolf and a dog, so he could even change his form. Immediately, Goliath transformed into a wolf with noticeably larger size. Mutsumi got on his back, saying he was very strong, and asked Asano if he wanted to join her. However, Goliath, like his brother-in-law, wagged his tail to shoo him away. Mutsumi had to give Asano the leash and told him to hold on tight. Goliath rushed forward like the wind, dragging Asano behind him as they ran through the water. After an exhilarating run, Asano lay on the ground in the park, soaked and exhausted. Suddenly, a group of children approached Goliath to look at him. Mutsumi stepped forward, but Goliath suddenly sensed something and an explosion occurred. Fortunately, Mutsumi saved the children while Goliath protected her. They realized that Asano had taken most of the damage. She was furious and told Goliath to find out who was responsible. Goliath immediately sensed the source of the explosion and followed a route through the city to find out where it came from. It turned out to be a clown from the dark web who had planned to kill Mutsumi. The young man, who was sitting in his mother's basement and staring at his computer, was shocked to see that his mother was still alive. He gritted his teeth in frustration. Suddenly, Goliath barges in and beats him up. That night, Asano receives a call, and he hides, saying he needs to go home. Mutsumi doesn't ask any questions and tells Goliath to bring them back. Surprisingly, Goliath allows Asano to ride on his back this time. When he gets home, Asano is immediately targeted by Kurosaki, who accuses him of cheating with another woman. Hearing the word cheating, Kyoichiro arrives as well, intending to beat him up. Before they can confront Asano, two people enter the room, claiming to be government spies. They say that it was all a misunderstanding, and that Kaoru is an old man. The spies bring out a box of special sweet tea that Asano has been looking for. Asano explains that he only wants tea leaves that Kyoichiro likes, which are as difficult to find as Kyoichiro's difficult personality. He went through many missions to obtain the ingredients, but wanted to keep it a secret from his family. Kyoichiro, who could not believe that his mistreated brother-in-law had such devotion, was immediately humiliated and almost hanged himself. Afterwards, everyone sat down to enjoy tea and discuss the future plans of the Yozakura clan. A few days later, Futaba was training Asano's reflexes by shooting rubber balls at him with a strange contraption. He had to run for his life, dodging the balls. After a tiring training session, he returned home and saw Mutsumi looking at an old photo album. Everyone in the pictures looked quite young, and Mutsumi proudly showed it to Futaba and Asano. Asano asked when the photo was taken, and Mutsumi explained that it was to commemorate Nanao passing the spy certification exam. Futaba mentioned that their family tradition was to take a family photo whenever someone in the household received a spy certification. Curious about the certification, Asano noticed that both women seemed surprised by his interest. Futaba then took a sip of tea and explained that a spy certification was similar to a membership card issued by the Spy Association. The association was established in the early 20th century by several spies to support one another. They held annual exams, and those who passed received the spy certification. Futaba proudly showed off her own certification, claiming it was the highest level of certification. She explained that when a spy received their certification, they could access information and job references from the association, along with other benefits. Everyone started at the bronze level, and by passing higher level exams, they could advance their rank. As the level increased, the missions became tougher, but the rewards also grew. Asano expressed his desire to take the spy certification exam, and Futaba supported him. Just then Kyoichiro arrived and overheard the conversation. He told Asano that he was pleased his brother-in-law wanted to pursue the spy certification, but reminded him that every family member had passed the test on their first attempt. He warned Asano that if he failed to pass the test on his first try, he would personally kick him out. So Kyoichiro started chasing after his brother-in-law. But fortunately, Asano was interrupted by Kurosaki's anguished scream. It turned out that she was crying and apologizing to Shion in her room. When everyone asked what happened, Shion said that it was nothing big. She was doing some sketches when Kurosaki tripped over a cable, ruining her entire project. Suddenly, a large screen in front of Shion lit up, displaying a horrifying scene from a movie. Asano stared in confusion, wondering what kind of mess could have led to such a result. However, within a second, Mutsumi and Shion realized what had just happened, and Futaba turned pale with fear. The two siblings sighed and carried Futaba outside. Shivering, Futaba curled up in her blanket, and Mutsumi revealed that her sister was very afraid of ghosts because her powers had no effect on them. Shion recounts that Futaba once destroyed a haunted house in the past. Mutsumi pats her sister on the head, assuring her that she will get over her fear after resting, and that they will keep an eye on her until then. However, this is easier said than done, as Futaba is so scared that even the sound of wind hitting the window makes her cling to Mutsumi. Taking this opportunity, Shion tells her about the recent mysterious events in the house, as Goliath has been acting a bit strange. Futaba's fear increases, and Mutsumi has to cover Shion's mouth to keep Futaba from pulling her hair. Futaba, now acting like a scared child in an adult's body, clings to Mutsumi and asks her siblings to protect her. She even asks Shion to go with her to the bathroom, and insists that Shion change the channel on the TV whenever a horror movie is about to air. Shion had to quickly change the channel with the remote control to avoid being scared any further, but teasing Futaba became a family pastime, and she was considered a troublemaker for the rest of the day. After spending the day with Futaba, Mutsumi went to bed with her and told Asano to stay on guard so they could sleep peacefully. Futaba was still trembling, so Mutsumi decided to read her favorite bedtime story to her. The story was a modern retelling of a famous Japanese folktale. It began with a brutal, endless war between demons and humans. One day, an old woman found a boy by the river and took him in. As Mutsumi read this part, she fell unconscious, and Asano had to continue reading. He narrated how the boy grew up to be humanity's hope and ultimately killed his best friend. a demon, in the final battle. Asano was deeply unsettled by the twisted, horror-filled tale, but was surprised to see Futaba clapping enthusiastically, praising the story. She had returned to normal and apologized to Asano for her earlier behavior, thanking him for his patience. Futaba mentioned that her mother had once read this story to her, and she hadn't been scared back then. However, after her mother passed away, she began to fear that everything she cherished would eventually be taken away by life. Futaba felt like a failure as the eldest daughter of the Yozakura family, saying that instead of protecting her siblings, she was the one needing care and attention. She speaks of her insecurities and focuses on Asano for listening. Asano acknowledged the pain of losing loved ones and how it motivated him to become stronger to protect those he cared about. Futaba smiled at her brother-in-law's heartfelt response and told him to go to bed. She relies on him once more and wishes him luck for the upcoming certification exam. Asano left the room, and Futaba gently patted Mutsumi, tucking her in. The day of the spy certification exam arrived. The first task for Asano and the other candidates was to run with heavy weights attached to their legs. Mutsumi watched from the waiting area, cheering enthusiastically for her husband. Asano finished the race first, surpassing all the other competitors. Everyone was impressed with the new member of the Yozakura clan, but some were bitter. Afterwards, Asano ate some rice balls made by Mutsumi. She reminded him to rest well before entering the next test. The feather-haired youth, who had lost to Asano in the race, was watching them from a corner. He intended to confront Asano and win his prize, attacking him with a dagger. However, before he could get close, a strong wind blew him away. Another participant pointed out that internal disputes between candidates were forbidden. The young man named Tsukiyo saw the broken dagger and ran away in panic. Asano thanked Tsukiyo, but Tsukiyo insisted that it was unnecessary. He said that he was just protecting something he liked. Tsukiyo picked up a grain of rice from Asano's face and ate it, starting a rude conversation. Asano immediately points a gun at Tsukiyo's head, warning Mutsumi to be careful of this bastard. Tsukiyo tells Asano that he doesn't need the gun because he already shot an arrow through his heart. Asano grits his teeth, feeling goosebumps all over his body. Mutsumi, realizing Tsukiyo's intentions, gets angry and tells him to stay away from his husband. However, Tsukiyo says that he doesn't mind being a servant if it means he can be near Asano. He starts taking close UPS of Asano's face and even brings along a miniature Asano doll that he made from Asano's discarded clothes and hair from previous missions. Asano is about to retaliate when an announcement announces that the next test is about to begin. Tsukiyo takes the opportunity to grab Asano's hand and drag him away. The next test involves escaping from underwater shackles, which Asano completes with ease. Tsukiyo, who was waiting near the tank, cheered for Asano as he emerged from the water, turning to call him husband. The next test was a game of hide and seek with several burly executioners chasing the participants. Tsukiyo found Asano and hugged him tightly. Asano struggled free from the young man, but was soon pursued by two executioners. The subsequent test involved defusing a bomb, which Asano successfully did with plenty of time to spare. However, Tsukiyo continued to shadow him, attempting to sabotage his efforts. The next test was a written exam. Those who answered incorrectly would be disqualified. Asano struggled with some of the questions, but Tsukiyo decided to help him by showing the answer sheet. With Tsukiyo's help, Asano managed to answer all the questions correctly. Fortunately, this was the final test, and the spy certification exam was nearing its end. Afterward, all participants gathered in a room where they were informed that they could receive their spy certifications immediately. However, the location would be dismantled right away to maintain security, and they would face one last challenge before receiving their certificates. The hallway began to collapse, and everyone raced forward at top speed while others fell behind. Asano and Tsukiyo managed to avoid all the obstacles, but the young man who had lost to Asano earlier took advantage of the chaos to strike Asano. The floor beneath them began to crumble, threatening to drop them at any moment. Tsukiyo, however, came to Asano's aid. From behind, Tsukiyo used his fan to propel Asano forward to safety, while he himself fell into the debris and pool below. Despite the danger, Asano refused to let go of Tsukiyo's hand, determined not to let his rescuer suffer. Moved by Asano's resolve, Tsukiyo used his fan to create a gentle breeze, lifting them both to safety. They landed smoothly on the ground, and Tsukiyo informed Asano that he had passed the test. Seeing Asano's confusion, Tsukiyo introduced himself as a silver-level spy and the overseer of the exam. Tsukiyo explains that while the tests are designed to assess the participants' skills, each participant will be assigned a supervisor to evaluate their character. The feather-haired youth who lost to Asano earlier had his spy license taken away by an older man, who claimed that he had failed. Tsukiyo then steps forward to take Asano's certificate, stating that Asano is a man worthy of respect and trust, which is why he passed the test. Asano is delighted to receive his certificate and believes that Tsukiyo is just joking about his previous comments. However, Tsukiyo shakes her head, confirming that she truly admires Asano. Asano, feeling embarrassed, jumps into the pool below. That evening, a ceremony is held to celebrate Asano's obtaining his spy license. During the party, Kyoichiro fell from the roof and casually explained that he had created secret passages to spy on Mitsumi. Unfortunately, since the walls were too thin, he fell and injured himself. Futaba, noticing the commotion, climbed on Kyoichiro and caused him to drop several devices. She realized that Kyoichiro had also used the hollow walls to spy on Mitsumi and tried to justify her actions. Futaba broke some of Kyoichiro's bones in her frustration. The family then took a commemorative photo with Asano to celebrate his success in passing the spy license exam, which was added to their family album. A few days later, when Asano opened his bag, he was shocked to see a perverted old man inside. The old man winked at Asano and asked how his studies were going. After crawling out of the bag, he explained that the facial recognition system in the house would reset if they were away for a year, so he decided to hide in Asano's bag to avoid having to deal with the traps. Asano could only remain silent, and the old man commented that if his new grandson was so clueless, things would not go well. Asano's mind finally caught up, and he quickly pulled out his gun, seeing the old man as an intruder. He shot the old man, despite his pleas not to. Mitsumi had to rush over to explain, and only then did Asano believe that the old man was indeed the grandfather of the Yozakura family. Kurosaki arrived with a towel for the old man, who immediately began flirting with her. He then pulled Asano and Mitsumi closer, praising Mitsumi for finding a husband with good reflexes. He also gave them a thick bundle of money as a wedding gift. When Mitsumi asked if that was the only reason he came here, the old man nodded but added that there was more to it than that. He suddenly pulled Asano along, saying that it was time for him to learn a life lesson. Ban is suddenly trapped by Kyoichiro's spiderweb, and Kyoichiro wonders what the old man is doing there. The old man asks Kyoichiro if he is on a mission overseas, to which Kyoichiro replies that he received an urgent mission from the police to bring back a fugitive criminal from the Yozakura clan. Asano is stunned by this information, but the old man clarifies that it is a misconception. Ban reveals that he is actually spying in prison, gathering information from the criminal underworld. Ban says that he will return soon but wants to take a short break to enjoy himself. Kyoichiro, who knows about the old man's penchant for women and his tendency to speak carelessly when drunk, notes that this is why the old man is not allowed out of prison unless it is urgent. Kyoichiro declares that his vacation is over and tells Ban not to act superior, reminding him that he is also his grandfather. The old man escapes the spiderweb and activates a smoke bomb with his watch. When the smoke clears, he has disappeared along with his grandson-in-law, Asano. Kyoichiro receives a call from the police officer in charge of the old man, informing him that Asano has been sent to follow the old man. At the same time, Goliath arrived at Mitsumi's side, holding in his mouth a photo of a man and a woman. This made her recall something, and soon after, Kyoichiro called Asano to discuss Ban's special abilities. Ban had the power to control his bones, making them extremely flexible. He had gathered a vast amount of information over the decades, and almost everyone in the espionage world was after him. That's why Kyoichiro advised Asano to capture Ban, even if it meant putting in extra effort. Fortunately, Asano was currently with Ban in an exclusive bar where the old man was flaunting his wealth and information to the public. He disclosed some top-secret information to the women around him. Asano tried to silence him, but Ban easily escaped Asano's grasp. He taunted Asano, saying he was too inexperienced to stop him. However, Ban soon found himself stuck in a sticky substance that Asano had prepared. With his years of experience, Ban quickly handled the situation, stripping off his clothes and striking poses in front of the women. He challenged Asano, predicting that in about 5 years, Asano would be able to surpass him. When Asano asked why Ban had to break out of prison to meet them, Ban explained that he needed to do it today and insisted that someone as green as Asano wouldn't understand his reasons. Shortly after, the bar staff brought Ban his favorite drink and offered some to Asano, who declined due to his age. Ban called Asano a coward and asked when he would ever get to hold his grandchild. Asano was startled, and Ban decided to tease him by recounting vivid stories about how he and his wife had made a baby. Ban recounted that his life had been bleak and solitary until he met Keiko. He described it as a rainy day when he was injured during a mission and Kiko found him, which changed his life forever. Ban said that his wife had been too good to him, and he felt that Asano was similar to him, which is why he wanted to speak with him as a man married into the Yozakura family. He advised Asano to cherish the present to avoid future regrets. Asano poured Ban a drink, affirming that Mutsumi had made him the happiest person alive and that he would always cherish and protect her. Ban took a sip and expressed his fondness for Asano, becoming closer to him. However, Ban was unaware of an elderly woman approaching him. She only caught his attention when he was already handcuffed. She warned that if he tried to free himself from the cuffs using any means, they would both explode. She advised him to behave if he didn't want to die on the same day, month, and year. Mutsumi arrived at that moment and apologized to Asano for being late. She then introduced the elderly woman as Mrs. Kaiko. Asano was startled because, according to Ban's story, he thought Kaiko had passed away, but that wasn't the case. Ban clung to his wife and inquired about her favorite drink, as well as gifts for their anniversary. Mrs. Kaiko refused to listen to his excuses and promptly sent him back to prison despite his dramatic pleas. Asano finally understood why Ban had escaped from prison that day. Mutsumi said she only remembered this after seeing their old photos. Asano also understood Ban's feelings, and Mutsumi blushed when she heard Asano say that she had made him the happiest person on earth. With those feelings in her heart, she held his hand. The next day, Mutsumi showed Asano some photos of herself and Ban. Ban had convinced his wife to date him before returning to prison. Asano noted that one thing everyone could learn from Ban was to strive for romance even in old age. A few days later, Ban escaped from prison again to visit the family, but he only found Kurosaki there since the others had gone shopping for the month with their family. They were having lunch at a fancy restaurant, and everyone had plans for the rest of the afternoon. Kyoichiro intended to sneak away, but Futaba grabbed his hand and demanded that he pay the bill. He said he would only pay for Mutsumi's bill, but after being struck by her innocent and pure gaze, he ended up paying for everyone's meals. Afterwards, everyone went their separate ways, and Asano recalled the times he used to go shopping with Mutsumi's family. Mutsumi called him, and he asked what they would be buying today. She said they needed some ordinary groceries, but ended the list with bullets and grenades. She wasn't joking and actually bought some grenades from a concealed section of the shopping mall. Next, they went to a cafe in the mall, where Mutsumi ordered 100 kilograms of coffee powder. Asano was puzzled, but the cafe staff understood and delivered 100 kilograms of ammunition to them. Asano finally started to understand a little, and Mutsumi confirmed that this was the place where assassins, spies, and everyone from the underworld bought supplies. Meanwhile, Shion and Shinzo were at an elderly, doddering man's shop. He sold them a chip that could help process information from an ancient memory sphere. Shinzo was confused about which gun to buy from the shop, but Shion, knowing his habits, told him to choose the gun on the left. Futaba was getting a massage from a muscular old woman who advised her to take better care of her body since she knew Futaba had been overworking herself. Nanao was buying some highly concentrated cyanide, and Kengo was purchasing face masks to ensure his skin remained smooth for easier disguise. Kyoichiro entered a secret bookstore and bought an extremely rare horror book with a sinister plot. Asano also visited a specialized laundry where they made ordinary clothes bulletproof and removed bloodstains. There, a little girl suddenly grabbed his arm and called him Dad. Asano took her to Mutsumi and explained that she had lost her parents in the mall. Mutsumi tried to comfort the girl named Suzu and learned that some frightening individuals had taken her father down to the basement. Mutsumi, being alert, entered a secret code into the elevator to take them to the building's hidden basement, where they sold items that you wouldn't find even on the dark web. When they reached the basement, Asano was astonished as it looked like a fantasy movie scene. They continued walking, and the girl recognized her father's voice calling for help. Her father's previous employer was forcing him to do their dirty work again, and when he refused, the employer had gouged out his eyes. Asano stunned the employer by shooting him, and Suzu was reunited with her father. Mutsumi said they should leave immediately, but then she realized they were surrounded. No one wanted to mess with the head of the Yozakura family, but they knew the bounty on Asano's head and immediately rushed to capture him. Asano was terrified when the group of perverts jumped at him, but Kyoichiro arrived to rescue him, dealing with the attackers in a single strike. Asano felt relieved to see him, but then realized that the book in Kishiro's hands was a collection of torture methods and knew that his brother-in-law would use him as a guinea pig for experiments. Feeling hesitant, Asano was unsure whether to attack him, but the headband-wearing youth still believed they had the advantage in numbers. Soon, The other members of the Yozakura family arrived and used their special abilities to quickly take down all the criminals in a single blow. They took the elevator up to the main building, and shortly after, the building began to sink due to their reckless actions. They exited the building as the shopping center was gradually being submerged.